Well, good morning, everybody. Neil Foley from the Business Growth Club here. A very warm welcome, and I'm really pleased to be sitting with an old friend of mine, Russell Marriott from Eastern Voice and Data. How are you, Russell?
I'm good, Neil. Nice to see you again.
Yeah, and you. So what we're going to do over the next half an hour or so is look at something that's called the Internet of Things. Now, I must admit, I'd never heard of that comment until I'd spoken to Russell about it probably about a year or so ago, and now I see it everywhere. So if we explore the Internet of Things and why that's important and connectivity, and does that sound like a reasonable proposition?
I think it does, Neil. Absolutely.
So let's kick straight off then. What does the Internet of Things mean?
So what the Internet of Things is essentially the way that equipment can be connected through the cloud or through data connectivity services. I think everybody has probably heard of a thing called an IP address. And what an IP address is how a piece of equipment is registered onto the network, onto the internet. And this can be various services. And what the Internet of Things actually is how you would actually layer different services with different IP addresses onto a single data connection. We do a lot of this work now, and really probably the best way of me trying to describe how in effect it actually does work in an office environment is that you'd have a single fibre connection coming into a premises, i.e. it's a data connection. That data connection then has a network set up, and now it will probably be a router with a network switch. What you're then able to do is that you're then able to connect different pieces of equipment, and those different pieces of equipment coexist on that same data connection but have an independent IP address.
So every piece of equipment has its own
every single piece of equipment.
Wow.
So what it means is that equipment effectively coexists. What it doesn't do, it's not fighting for its own part of that data connection. What it's doing, it's actually managed, and it's managed so it operates in the space that it needs to operate.
So some are very hungry, presumably, and
yes.
Others not so.
Not so hungry.
And some intermittent.
Yeah. Voice is not particularly hungry in terms of data. Data itself is obviously hungry. If you're downloading a video, you're downloading music, that is data hungry. Voice only needs about 100k for it to actually operate on a data connection. But
a data connection, you mean, in my simplistic terms, is broadband?
Broadband, and there are lots of different types of broadband.
Really?
The most common broadband that we're all aware of now is this thing called now superfast broadband.
But I thought it was just a marketing term.
Superfast broadband is actually just a marketing term. We actually know in the industry as fibre to the cabinet, FTTC, and probably most people will recognise where FTTC is because there'll be a big green box somewhere in their housing estate. And that big green box is where the fibre from the local exchange actually comes into. What BT have done in their wisdom, what they decided to do was that they decided that the quickest way of getting a upgraded the broadband service into our country was to provide fibre connections to those cabinets, and for the rest of that connection onwards from there to be copper. And that's okay. And we've got you've got the ability quite often to get something like about an 80 meg connection, which is
from
pretty
copper.
Decent from copper.
And copper, when you say copper, Russell, just excuse. I mean, you know, I'm ignorant. Full stop. But is copper literally copper wire? Is it literally a solid connection?
It is. So
and fibre is what?
Fibre optic is a cable that actually emits light. It carries light.
So it's still a cable.
Still a cable. So what it's doing, it enables you to transmit data, and far more data down a single connection at far higher speeds than copper ever will be able to do that. Problem we have in our country is that we do have an enormous amount of legacy copper cabling. You've only got to drive down a street and see the telephone poles, the telegraph poles.
Sure. Well, you've still got mine. You installed mine recently, and it's still on a pole.
Yep. And you've got organisations, companies that are still fed by copper, and they could be miles away from the local.
So hence, it's a big deal to go from copper to fibre if you're a long way from the green box.
Yeah, and I think one of the issues that we have as a country is that because BT actually went down this road of the fibre to the cabinet, and although it's rolled out, and I think we're now something like about 95% of the UK is now enabled with that service. it is a product that does have problems, and those problems are related to distance. And the further you are away from a cabinet, the worse broadband you're going to get. And that, unfortunately, is the fact, because you've got
even with fibre.
Even with fibre. So the solution really to that is for a full fibre connection. I think
what's a full fibre connection?
Where you'd actually have fibre opted directly into your premises.
Right.
And that's quite interesting. There's various government grants that are available now. They're trying to push companies down the road or certainly organisations down the road of full fibre connectivity. As a country, we're lagging seriously behind the rest of Europe, and you're looking at various countries that have got way more full fibre connections. Portugal is one. I think it's something like about 75% is now full fibre. That means, in effect, that they can be getting something like about 1,000 meg to a property.
Good grief.
And that's the difference, where we, at the moment, may, if you're very lucky and you've got a cabinet outside your front door, get 80. And that's a big difference.
That's huge, isn't it?
That's a big difference. And this is how, what we're now finding is that organisations are now realising that in order to carry the multiple services in this environment that we call the Internet of Things, you need that basic service initially in order to have those products that can be connected to it. If you haven't got that as an underlying provisioning, you're going to have problems. And this is why the government are now pushing grants to try and get organisations to upgrade connectivity, to put in full fibre, and as that increases, it's going to improve things for everybody ultimately.
And is full fibre just via BT?
No, full fibre is available from a number of suppliers. We actually are able to provide that ourselves via a government grant scheme. That's something that we've already done for a number of organisations. Available from different suppliers. Okay. It all comes down really to the infrastructure that's available in a locality and how it would actually be provided. But yeah, no, it can be.
So does it still come from the green box?
Yes, it does.
Still comes from there, but then you're taking direct fibre.
Yeah, the green box is described as the point of presence. So it's that point of presence where you've actually got fibre optic, and you would then come from that position, from that location, to provide fibre into the premises. But yeah, ultimately, this is really what we need, and this is what the country needs in order to upgrade services so we get faster and faster speeds.
So, as a business, so the Internet of Things is everything has an IP address, all coming in via a broadband or data connection. What are the benefits to the business then of linking everything together, and is it just technology, or is it? What is it? Can you encapsulate it?
Yeah, it's a really good question, and I suppose in some ways there's not an easy answer to that because all businesses are different. But really, what it comes down to is the fact that multiple services can actually coexist and can integrate.
Okay.
So let's look at quite a simple example. A simple example may be you're a business and you have a customer database. That customer database may well be cloud-based, so that information resides in the cloud. You may then have a telephony solution that is also cloud-based. But what you can then do with this kind of scenario is that you can then link those two things together. So a call would come in, the call is seen by the telephony in the cloud, it sees the same customer record in your customer database, it puts those two things together instantly, and it pops the details onto the screen.
Screen of the phone or the
of the PC?
Of the PC.
So the operative is then sitting there looking at the customer records and is able to answer the customer by name. Hello, Mr. Jones, how are you? With all the customer records available.
Wow.
There are other things that can be integrated. We can integrate, for example, security systems. So a door phone, an IP door phone, would be enabled to pop a video of the person that is calling at the front door of the business onto a PC screen, so you are able to talk to that person via your PC and obviously identify them and let them in or not as appropriate. There's other ways that can work as well. It can work with CCTV. You can be remote from a premises, and I think most people are possibly familiar with this kind of technology now. But this is only doable by Internet of Things, because you can actually access that IP address via your smartphone, via the cloud, to see that person who's knocking at your door, because it's connected via the internet.
And are there many companies now truly embracing this for using it for competitive advantage? Absolutely.
We've got some really good examples as to how this can actually roll out. I think there's more and more companies now that are realising that, first of all, going down the legacy route of having separate connections doing different things just really doesn't work. It means an expensive legacy of equipment. It means you're quite possibly dealing with multiple companies doing different things. What this enables companies to do is to have something potentially that's cloud-based, and that's more and more now common for us to provide cloud-based services, that becomes eminently scalable. It means then that you're not held back by something that's located in the premises. It's something that can grow, and it's something that can develop as your business grows and develops. And it's becoming now far more common for companies to embrace a monthly payment scheme to do to have these kind of services, rather than investing capital upfront in having equipment installed in the premises. But the way that companies are using this are varied. We have a good example of one of our clients up on the North Norfolk coast, who it's actually a chip shop. But it's a chip shop that provides multiple services on a single fibre connection. So a single fibre connection into this premises, the customer is actually using it for their telephony, they're using it for their CCTV, they're using it for their email, they're using it for their Sonos marketing music system, they're using it for clients to access Wi-Fi. And this is all on a single connection. Oh, credit card payments on there as well. So this is all on a single connection.
And North Norfolk is known as being an area with pretty poor broadband, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a bit of a misnomer, this now.
Really?
Yeah. There's pretty decent coverage in most areas now. But what we do is that when we look at what a company would need to do in terms of the services that they need to put on a data connection, we actually look at what data connectivity is actually available, and that's vital. It's not guesswork. It has to be done properly. You need to look at the potential, not just now, but also for the future, and how an organisation may grow, and to ensure that what you're putting in is that you're putting in a data connection that's going to be scalable for that company and to enable that company to grow. But yeah, there's some pretty decent broadband now that are available. Having said that, the use of data is now exponential. The growth of it is quite staggering, and I think most people only need to look back a few years. 10 meg broadband then would have been fantastic. People now are demanding more and more, and that will simply continue as we provide we do more and more services. And I think also there's other services that are coming through. I think we're seeing now more stable 4G connectivity on mobile phones. 5G will be available probably by mid-2020s, and 5G is going to be a huge revolution. I already think that we're in the midst of a revolution in terms of technology. It's a broadband revolution. It's a digital revolution in many ways. It's not going to slow down.
I read that the other day in terms of there was an article, I think, in the Sunday Times talking about houses, and because obviously we're in a slightly difficult housing market at the moment, and I think they were saying that connectivity and broadband speed was almost the number one priority for people moving house, to say, well, can I live there, work there, etc., because lots of us working from home and the rest of it. So, and in terms of VoIP, so voice over internet, I forgot what the piece Protocol, I was nearly there. Yeah. Does that mean people are moving away from big capital expenditure with switchboards and things like that, or are people still buying switchboards?
I would say no, but people are still buying telephone systems, and I think that there's two different ways of explaining this with VoIP. And VoIP has got two different flavours. One flavour is called SIP, S-I-P, Session Initiated Protocol, which basically is a telephone line that goes through the internet, and you would use a SIP line on a traditional premises-based telephone system, and there are reasons still why people would use premises-based telephone systems. Hotels, for example, are a good example. Schools is another good example. But for the vast majority of organisations, full cloud telephony is really the way a lot of organisations are now moving. What's crucial about both of these methods, however, is that the voice is provided on a managed service. What you need to understand with VoIP is if the packets are not delivered in the correct order, you end up with robotic sounding voice conversations, you end up with words actually being missed. Now that doesn't matter with data, because when you send data packets, it's reassembled by the router or the PC at the other end, and you'd never know that things were delivered in the wrong order. But with voice, that's crucial. And this is one of the things that we do, is that when we actually provide a data connection, that data connection is what's called a converged data connection. So the voice and the data are both managed independently on that connection, so that the voice is always delivered correctly.
And you call that a managed service?
We call that a managed service,
Okay.
yeah, we call that a managed service.
I'd heard you use that before. I didn't quite understand why, though. No, it makes sense now.
Yeah, it does. And that enables us to do lots of clever things. And one of the clever things it enables us to do is to actually manage the bandwidth that we can allocate to the voice. And that means that we can actually set different levels of voice quality. And one of the things that we can set up is a thing called HD, high definition voice quality. And high definition voice quality is if we've got the bandwidth that's available for us to do this, enables us to set a voice quality that is probably the best way of describing it, difference between medium wave radio and DAB radio, and you'll get a much clearer sounding voice. And it is interesting where we've done installations, particularly into doctors' surgeries, where maybe they've had traditional telephone lines, they've had problems in having conversations with elderly people, with poorly people, because of the quality of the phone line. All of a sudden, they've got this HD voice quality. Wow. The doctor doesn't have to shout anymore. No, you can have that normal conversation at normal levels, and it's very, very clear at both ends. In fact, it's crystal clear. Things are moving quite quickly in this marketplace. BT have already announced that ISDN is going to be switched off by 2025.
That's not far, is it?
That's not far away. But
so switched off, does that mean if you've got one, it won't work?
It won't work. Not by that time. But I think the crucial thing about this is that headline date of 2025 is the headline date. This is actually happening now. OpenReach have got some fairly major issues that they're now having to deal with. ISDN service is now something like about 30 years old, so it's a legacy service. The technicians who are able to engineer that, unfortunately, are retiring.
Of course.
The new technicians that are being brought in to OpenReach, and they are recruiting, obviously, on quite an amazing scale in order to roll out these services, are IP trained. And what that means is that slowly but surely the ISDN service quality is going to drop away.
Yes. Yes, you don't want to be the last man standing, the last person using it, do you?
Absolutely not. There's also talk that OpenReach will be putting up prices quite significantly to encourage people really to move their services away from these legacy connections. So that's something that's happening now. If you've got concerns about that as to, well, how does it affect me, really the best thing to do is to get in contact with us.
Yeah.
We'll have a conversation, we'll have a look and see what the data products are. I think a lot of people, in my experience, have jumped on the bandwagon of getting so-called superfast broadband. But what they haven't realised is that superfast broadband can be used for different services, not just surfing the internet.
Yeah.
And
hence we come back to that thing at the beginning saying the Internet of Things, isn't it?
Yeah.
So The other issue I know that you and I have talked a lot about is in terms of cyber security. So talk me through how that works, because clearly there's two vulnerabilities, isn't there, with cyber security? One's the human factor, where somebody does something that they shouldn't, or gets conned or whatever. But the other is access via all these individual machines and bits of kit that have got an IP address, presumably can be accessed from somebody with malicious intent on the outside. Yeah,
absolutely. I think personally this is probably the single biggest issue that faces any business currently, and most people are not aware of just how vulnerable they may well be.
Because of this IP bit, is that what makes you vulnerable? Because you can identify a particular machine, and that if you get into that, you can then access the rest of the network?
Yep, that certainly is part of it. But there are lots of other ways that people can access into networks. It could simply be that that you haven't upgraded software on a PC. It potentially makes it vulnerable. You haven't got an up-to-date firewall in place potentially that it's easily hackable. Maybe you haven't got an HTTPS website, which means it's unsecure.
I came across one yesterday. Sorry to interrupt you right there, Rob, but this makes me laugh. Santander you shouldn't laugh when I say that, just Santander, but Santander they've got a competition on at the moment. If you use their credit card, which I've got, because you get 3% back for spending on fuel, you get entered into a competition for football. And the email comes through, and I can recognise it and think, actually, I'm reasonably confident this is a Santander email. It takes me through to a Santander website, which is unsafe because it hasn't got an SSL certificate on it.
Yeah.
And you just think,
what is going on?
How on earth can that be?
What is going on?
It's bizarre, isn't it? But it just... Yeah. So it's not just, small companies, it's really big companies seem to struggle with doing the basics, don't they?
They do, absolutely. I think with cybersecurity, it is a realisation that we're actually dealing not with teenagers in bedrooms, we're actually dealing in a lot of cases with pretty organised crime here. We're dealing with terrorism, we're dealing with guys that have an awful lot of money that can throw at these things, and cyber crime is off the scale really in the UK, as it is really in the world. And what's really important is that you take the steps to actually protect your part of what the internet is, i.e. your router into your premises. You make sure that it's secure. You have a firewall, and
on the router.
There really does need to be a firewall.
So, as a normal punter, you wouldn't know how to do that, would you?
So
I can have a firewall on my PC. But I've got firewalls there, but how would I know to put a firewall on a router?
Yeah, some routers do come with it built in, and really you do need to take advice from your IT supplier as far as that is concerned. But I think really one of the other factors really with this, it's well worth investigating a government scheme called Cyber Essentials. That's a government-backed scheme. It's to do basically with trying to get all of us to be aware of what our issues here are with cyber security. It's quite a simple thing to actually go through. You would need to talk to an organisation like ourselves. We would do a security scan on your network. We would then see what those issues are, where your weak points are. And most people won't know where their weak points are. Once you've got that report so you can see what actually needs to be done, you can actually tighten those holes up. You can actually make sure that you are secure. You then get, in effect, a kite mark. You get a kite mark that is a government-accredited scheme that you are then able to show to your suppliers, to your customers, that you are a secure organisation to deal with. Most government bodies now won't deal with a company now unless they've actually got this accreditation.
Really?
Yeah.
I'm not surprised.
And this shows just really how important this is now for organisations to deal with. And I think most people feel it's not going to happen to them. It's the old one, isn't it? Well, it's not going to happen to me.
But you're having your burglar alarm after you've been burgled, isn't it? It doesn't make a lot of sense, does it?
We are contacted by organisations most weeks that have been victims of hacking in some shape or form. We're also part of Norfolk Cyber Security Cluster, which is a an organisation that's really aimed at trying to get best practice out there and trying to educate the business community just how important this is now. The world that we're in now is not going to change. The rate of change is just going to only increase with the way that we're all working, with this integration. It's going to give opportunities for criminals to actually access that information. It's important that you protect your part of what is the cyber world, and there are different ways that you can do that. But this is it's an important challenge that we all need to be aware of. So if anybody's listening to this, if you haven't heard of Cyber Essentials, just get on Google. There's a government website there, and it will give you a lot of information with regard to that.
It's a good site. I've been through it on your advice. And I guess that brings me on to something else, Russell, in terms of how things have changed, in that my guess is years ago you'd have been a telephony company. We'd have called you a telephony company, or, and then I'd have, as you say, get hold of your IT man. Then I'd have had an IT man over here who might have looked after my server or whatever. Whereas actually, they're all the same now, aren't they? In that you don't want these different silos. You want somebody to say, actually, it's the Internet of Things is what I need taken care of.
Yeah.
So otherwise you end up with one company paying off another, like the firewall and the router. Well, whose responsibility is that then? And how does that not, how do I make sure that doesn't conflict with my system, or then, Windows 10 does an upgrade and suddenly I've got a problem. So that's a big issue, isn't it? So is that, you're not really Eastern Voice and Data anymore, are you? In the sense of the voice bit and the data bit.
No, that's correct. I mean, really, what we describe ourselves now is as a business technology provider. In all shape and forms, and it's that ability to actually look at what an organisation needs and to actually recommend a solution. And we can recommend the whole solution, from the correct broadband provisioning all the way through to the support and the billing that goes on the end of it. But it also needs to include things like security that we've just spoken about. It also needs to include a correct network setup, and it also needs to include things like IT services. So we can now provide this fully integrated service, and this is really what it's about. It's about the correct broadband connection coming into your business. It's then the fact that we would then integrate these different services onto that broadband connection. It's really the future. It's really where things need to go. When we do an installation now for a new business onto a greenfield site, that's effectively what we do.
Do you?
It's effectively what we do. We'll do the infrastructure cabling, we'll get the correct broadband in there, we'll get the correct data switches, the correct firewall for the security, connect up the CCTV, the telephony, the IT, the door entry systems. All of this technology just fully then integrates. So you've then got a single point of contact for that whole setup.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense, doesn't it? And I know from when you work closely with people like Panasonic, and I remember one of the stats you told me, I think Panasonic do more patents every year than any other company in the world. Yeah, which is all around this sort of exact issue, isn't it?
It is, absolutely. And there is so much technology now that people don't often realise just how it does integrate. Wi-Fi is a really good example. Wi-Fi can now carry voice. So if you're in a large organisation and you've got Wi-Fi throughout your premises, you can actually use the Wi-Fi to carry your voice.
So if you're at one desk, you're on a hands-free.
Yep.
Right. You can walk to another. You can walk around the building and go and find Russell and.
Yep. Or even on your mobile phone.
Oh, really?
You can have an app on your mobile phone that effectively makes your mobile phone an extension of your telephony solution.
So if you need to go and check something or go and talk to somebody, you can literally wander over.
You can. We're now doing solutions where we even have workers that can operate from home using their mobile phones. They're actually using their Wi-Fi connection. They're then connected to their telephony solution via the cloud. They're part of their hunt group for their incoming calls. So their calls are going to their mobile phone. They don't need to be sat in the office anymore. They can operate in their own space. And it's these kind of things that are really causing a revolution in how we all work. And it will not It will not slow down. It's
So
just
where do you
gonna
think
grow.
we'll be in 5 years' time then on the technology front?
Well, to me, the big thing that's going to really change things dramatically is going to be 5G, and I think we're lucky enough in Norwich to have a 4G connection. Generally, it's pretty decent. There's a lot of rural areas that don't, but the 5G thing is going to be the big game changer.
And is 5G just mobile speed? Is that what it's about?
Yeah,
right,
it's mobile
okay.
speed. So the best way of describing how this is going to change the way that we all live now is that an HD movie on 4G would normally take you 10 minutes to download. On a 5G connection, that would actually be downloaded in 10 seconds.
Good grief.
And it's that difference in speed that will enable technology to be more functional in terms of how it would operate. And the examples that really I draw from that would be things like drone delivery, that drones would be able to be controlled because they'd be surrounded by high-speed broadband. Driverless cars, absolutely, without a doubt, that would be the case. And probably that may well also mean the end of landline broadband services, because that just would not be required.
Because you'll just use your mobile.
You'd use your mobile. Yeah.
So you don't want to be BT, that's what you're saying. Well, it's been a fascinating half an hour, Russell, just over half an hour. We need to do some follow-ups because there's so much we could talk about. But hopefully that gives people a flavour for what the Internet of Things is. It's been an education process for me. If people want to get hold of you, how do they get hold of you, Russell, if they just need to ask for some help and advice?
Yeah, our website, www.easternvoicedata.co.uk. If you'd like to give us a phone call, we do like to talk to people on the telephone, 01603 743388.
That's brilliant. And I've known Russell for a long time and used his services. And get in touch because Russell will just talk you through the issues. And thanks very much for listening. And so until next time, thanks very much, Russell. Goodbye.
Thanks, Neil.